Salvelinus fontinalis by Todd Davis. We begin with an epigraph by David James Duncan. By the time you hold the native in your hands, it is you who has been caught, you who shines and feels like silver, you who came long ago from water, you who suddenly can't live without this beautiful river. The water's footsteps descend the stairs of the mountain, digging pools where native brook trout feed and lay down their seed in redds, where even more water forces its way up through the gravel, ushering in the young of the year. Springs rise everywhere in this stream, struggling to forgive us the minds we tunneled and left behind in a century we try to forget. Partway up the mountain, acid mine drainage seeps from the punctured side of the ridge. Iron sulfate sweeps down and banks its orange flames in a grotesque tongue of deceit. Scientists call it a kill zone. Nothing lives in its wake. We walk more than a mile downstream before we see the first crayfish, and further to find a lone brookie. I spend most of my time searching for these native fish. My wife asks what I wish to do with them. It's not about hunger, although a few times each year I build a small fire in a ring of stone, melt butter in a cast iron skillet. How easily the pink and white flesh departs from needle-thin bones, and fingers bring quivering meat to the tongue, sweet muscle that lashed the body to the current and now fixes itself to the threads of my flesh. I suppose another kind of hunger causes me to cradle them, to long for a connection with that life hidden in rock seams, the breach of boulders, white foam of oxygen fashioned by water falling over downed beeches and hemlocks. At 50, my eyes have begun to fail. Before it all goes dark, I want to take in the dimensions of each fish, arrange their bodies on moss beds, and capture what I've missed in a photograph. I'll return to these pictures when sleep offers no reverie as improbable as the dream of creation, and the forever shifting fantasy of evolution that caused this Atlantic char to convert, to become landlocked in a creek most mapmakers ignore. We all worship something. I'll take the beauty and strength of these fish, holy and godlike, with backs vermiculated, so you can't see them as they fan above strewn rocks at your feet. I've caught myself praying to them, hoping such prayers might help them save themselves, and because I can't escape the religion of my youth, I still believe God is one, or at least three in one, the world drenched by the Holy Spirit of this fish's colors. Stepping along the bank, I crush wild mint with my boot. The fragrance rises into the June air, reminding me of the mint we grew at the back steps of the farmhouse, and the friend who would drape his fish in these pungent leaves at the bottom of his creel, keeping the fish fresh for the evening meal. Consider each cell trembling in my hand as I hold this fish that gives me faith, or the scales that cover its side and quake as it fights at the end of my line, or the life that runs through rushing water and the gravity that forces that water down the slope of this mountain in which these ever-moving bodies bless us with their unceasing faithfulness. If you've been in a room when someone dies after a long illness, then you know how sight recedes, how the dying fade from the physical body, the silence somehow different, not the lack of sound, but its absence. In high school, I read about the transmigration of souls, and later in college about how the sun would go out and the earth would cease to be. I wonder where these souls will go when that day comes. Here, the hermit thrush breaks the stillness as it praises the river and all those that reside within its banks. I've seen the bird's notes written in a field guide as, "Oh, holy, holy, ah, purity, purity, ah, sweetly, sweetly." Who could argue with that? I wish I could sing just a few of those lines, but only a croak flies out of my mouth. As vast as the green world seems when I'm inside this seam of forest that was nearly destroyed, I know we've been left a fragment of what ought to be here. So many of us have the urge to travel long distances, to escape the place we were born or find ourselves consigned to. I don't drive my pickup more than 10 miles in any direction. The news of the universe I'm interested in is written on the sides of these fish. At the edge of the riffles white curling, I count 3 brookies looking up for a terrestrial to float by, a chance to dart skyward, to sip the surface with open jaws. As the fish grow older, longer in tooth, I understand better what Wang Wei wrote after the death of Yin Yao. Of your bones, now buried, white cloud, this much remains forever. Streams cascading empty toward human realms.